So let's go way back, even further back than to Dead or Alive.
Yes.
What did punk mean to you when it came up? Did it have an impact on you?
Well, punk did have an impact on me before it hit the media. Punk was for me, it was a great time of freedom and self-expression, and then it became commercialized with the media getting onto it and people suddenly thinking that they were punks, and it just spoiled it completely because people became like tabloid punks acting and behaving in a fashion that really had nothing to do with punk. Punk started fundamentally in English gay clubs and it spread into other clubs that were like rock venues. When it started in gay clubs, it wasn't necessarily just gay people that were into it. It was just people who were into Bowie and things like that, who were into dressing up and being flamboyant. And that's where it started. And that had I wouldn't say it had an influence on me because I was like that before punk, but it gave me a label that I fitted into. And because of the way I was dressing, I lost my first job in the 70s. I was a hairdresser. I started to wear Vivienne Westwood clothes, which I still do exclusively. And I was fired from the hair salon, so I was forced to start a clothing shop. And the clothing shop did kind of do-it-yourself punk clothes and stuff, and I kind of made a lot of money, and I was frequenting a very legendary club in Liverpool, sorry. I was frequenting a very legendary club called Eric's in Liverpool, and I stood out the most, and all the bands there wanted to get to know me, and I was just a child, so I was very shy. And the owner one day came into my shop and he said, if you don't get a band together, you're not going to be allowed in the club ever again. And I thought, well, I don't want to be a singer. What am I going to do? So he said, I'll put a band together for you. You've got to sing for your supper and be in a band. So I did. I started a band called the Mystery Girls that lasted roughly 2 weeks. And I really wasn't interested. And after we split up, things like John Peel sessions came in. We were kind of a, electric guitar and drum band and stuff like that, and that really didn't interest me. I was more interested in things like Silvester and, early disco and stuff, and the original punks were into Silvester and early disco. And then once it became commercialised, we got the rise of the Sex Pistols and Susie and the Banshees and people with the very do-it-yourself attitude, because nobody then could actually make synthesised music because no one had the money to buy a synthesizer. And it was a great mystery how people like Giorgio Moroder were making these great records with Donna Summers. So everybody really, I believe, was doing it just for the sake of doing something and being on a stage, myself included, but I wasn't really into it. And then punk passed in about 1977, 1978. It was over for me. I had nothing to do with any of the bands, and I kept getting offered things like John Peel sessions and Kid Jensen sessions. So what I'd have to do for the money is throw together a lineup of temporary musicians. Then I'd do these sessions, and they were very successful. And then I'd disband the band, and another session would come in, and I'd write 3 songs that were shit, and I'd do the session and get some money. And gradually it moved into Nightmares in Wax that made one single that was quite successful called Black Leather. It was an attempt at disco, but it was absolutely Scheissdreck, as you'd say in German. And I started to get offered very prestigious gigs to do for good money. So I put a band together and I did the gigs, and somehow it grew into Dead or Alive. And when we started, I had a keyboard player who had a little knowledge of disco, so he could do synthesized stuff and do not computers then, they were sequencers then. It's so long ago. And we had a couple of tracks that were like that, but largely our set was made up of basic music, which I hated. And suddenly record companies started to come and see us, and I thought, I best get serious now. So we had a solid lineup, and next thing we were signed to a record company. And I worked with a fantastic German producer who totally understood what I wanted to do. His name was Zeus Beheld, and he did my first album, Sophisticated Boom Boom, and he took it to a level of a fusion of disco and punk, and it was very good. It's my favourite album. And it was quite successful, and it started to get successful in America. And
We're going to come to that later on. Let's not move so fast in time.
It all happened so fast.
Yes, but I'm interested in Nightmares in Wax. Would you say that was a post-punk band then? Would you say that?
Yeah, it was Nightmares in Wax was a post-punk band. Yeah, but it was just a case of all I hope for one day is someone could come along and make a Giorgio Moroder type record with me, and I waited years for it.
Okay. What would you say? Was there something because when punk was over, the music scene for me exploded in a way in different directions. Things like two-tone became very, how do you say, not important, but yeah, even commercially very successful. And there were things like, on the other hand, like Gang of Four or Wires, independent rock bands, and also electronic bands like the Human League started. Would you say that there was something that all these artists had in common at the time?
Well, it was all just a quest to make pop music. Everybody wanted to make pop music, and the thing is, you don't just wake up one day and think I'm going to make a dance record or a pop record. You've got to start somewhere, and often the beginnings of what you're doing aren't exactly what you want to be doing. I mean, I loved the Human League in the early days. I really loved them, but as far as two-tone and things like that, I largely wasn't aware. I've never been an avid music fan. I haven't purchased a CD in about 6 years. I'm largely unaware of what goes on out there. I'm aware of what I do, and it's a bit like working in a restaurant. You don't really eat the food or go home and cook. You just, you do something else. And that's what making music is. It consumes you totally for the period that you're making it. And when it's over, it's over. I just dip in and out of music. So to comment on, did everybody have anything in common? I guess they did, but I can't say that with any knowledge.
Okay. So what did you like from the Human League?
Being Boiled, Empire State Human, the early indie singles I really liked, because they started to be played in the sort of dying punk clubs and stuff like that, and I thought they had a very interesting sound. I also liked very early New Order, and but I didn't really pay attention to it. I wasn't a fan of it.
Okay, but it was really only the music, not the whole concept.
No, just the music I liked, just the music. I've never been a follower of anybody, ever. So it's very difficult for me to comment on it. I mean, if they made a good record, they made a good record. As far as I'm concerned, there's only two kinds of music, and that's good music and shit music.
That's right. What did you think about those? I mean, you told me already you like the Human League. I haven't heard the Nightmares in Wax single.
Please don't.
But was that an opportunity for you to go in this direction into more synthy pop music?
The Nightmares in Wax single was a baby step into doing disco pop, but it was still very underground because we didn't have the facilities to make a blatantly commercial record. It was done in a 4-track studio, so you can imagine how basic that was. But it set a precedent for me to follow. I knew I was going in the right direction, but after the Nightmares in Wax single, I didn't have a set to perform, and very quickly we threw together a set of 7 songs, and the gigs just kept growing. So it was growing faster than I could grow. I wasn't ready for it, but I just trod water and carried on with it until, one day I could make that dance record that I dreamed about making.
Mm-hmm. So what did you thought about the whole gender bender thing?
I didn't think about it. It was nothing to do with me. It's just another label. There's one thing I don't sit comfortably with is labels. I can't comment on the gay community because, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a gay community. There's just people. The gender bender thing I had nothing to do with. I wasn't cross-dressing, but I was already flamboyant and wearing makeup. And the thing is, the time that I came from, which is the very early 70s, artists like David Bowie and Jabriath and Iggy Pop weren't put into a gender bender box. They were just unique individuals. It was just a great name for the press to come up with to categorize people, and I didn't go along with the category at all.
Yeah, but what I meant is, when David Bowie came up with Ashes to Ashes and this Pierrot look, and Steve Strange came up with Visage, David Sylvian from Japan, all this thing. I mean, you could have thought, been there, done that, or whatever. What were your thoughts?
I thought, been there, done that. Been there, done that, and I was in a growth period. That's the great thing about youth, is you're always changing and evolving. It's something that, even though I'm kind of old now, I hang on to, the right to change, and you're never going to categorize me in a box is something that I absolutely won't go along with. Mm-hmm. And at that time, when Bowie did Ashes to Ashes, and as far as Japan are concerned, I didn't give a damn about them. I thought they were dreadful. I preferred Roxy music when they started, and as far as I was concerned, David Sylvian was just a third-rate impersonator of Brian Ferry vocally, and I'd heard it all before. The thing is, I don't like rehashes of something that I've heard before, and that's the thing about getting older. You realise there is nothing new, and in many ways I think it's time to die, because there's nothing new that impresses me, because I've heard it before and I know where it's come from. And that happened in my 40s. Every record I knew where it was stolen from. Even the Pet Shop Boys' West End Girls, the chord structure was identical to Silvester's Mighty Reel, so I'd heard it before. And if I've heard it before, it's not relevant. But there is nothing new. Everything comes from the past, and that is the thing about getting old. You realise everything is the past rehashed, and you kind of shut down to it.
Yeah, I mean, the number of melodies is limited in a way, because you have only
and isn't that a shame? Yeah.
You have only so much different, what do you say, keys or
chords? Only so many different chords. Yeah, the number of melodies is limited, but the thing is that what I find very churlish about pop music is nobody ever mentions where they get their influences from. They're ashamed of their influences. They don't mention it. They mention anything else. Like if you interviewed somebody like the Pet Shop Boys, although I adore what they do, I think they're very unique. If you'd interviewed them then, they'd have probably said that they liked Aerosmith. They wouldn't have admitted to listening to Silvester, because they would have thought, oh, well, we're obviously stealing something from Silvester, so we don't want to acknowledge him. I've always acknowledged my influences.
Why did you think was dressing up at the time? We're talking about 1980, 1981 maybe. Why was dressing up so important at the time?
It's something that I've always done, so I can't answer that question on behalf of other people. It was a state of being. It wasn't importance. It was just something I naturally did. Like the same way you're dressed today, it's as easy for me to dress this way. So it wasn't something that was premeditated. It just came naturally. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have the pressure to dress up, or to dress up for a special occasion and put something on that you're never going to wear again and be that uncomfortable. So I can't comment on why it was so important. Well, I can. I think it was a form of self-expression, and it came out of punk, and people were looking for a different kind of style, and it was experimental. And you saw a lot of interesting things in the 80s that you don't see anymore. People on the street were more colourful. I always was very eager for the 80s to end, thinking there'd be something better, and there wasn't. And I think in general, society, fashion and music, we've made a lot of progress, but unfortunately all of it is downhill.
But given the times, by 1979 when Margaret Thatcher went on...
I wasn't even aware of her. I'm not politically aware as far as I'm concerned about Margaret Thatcher and the Thatcherite regime.
But if you took a look around in Liverpool, was it a very colourful
No,
town?
Liverpool wasn't a very colourful town. There were a few select people who stood out, but they stood out in the daytime. They didn't necessarily go to clubs, because in that period of the 80s, Eric's had gone, the clubs had closed, there was nowhere to really go. So people were like that on the street in the day, doing basically quite normal jobs, so they were unemployed. There was a lot of creativity musically in Liverpool. There were a lot of bands like the Teardrop Explodes and Echo and the Bunnymen who weren't, shall we say, flamboyant. And then there was the other end of the scale of people who were considered dressers up or posers, and I guess I was considered one of those, although I didn't consider myself one.
By the way, did you have to see OMD at the time?
No, I never saw OMD. I can't bear them.
Can't bear them?
No, I've heard a record by them and I can't stand it.
Why?
Because music brings about some kind of physical and emotional response in me, and if I hear the first three chords, I don't care who it's by. If I don't like it, I'm not going to listen to the following three chords. And I just didn't like the record that I heard, and I don't even remember the title of it. I heard a snatch of it because they were based in Liverpool, and I just didn't like it. I preferred Echo and the Bunnymen. In fact, I loved Echo and the Bunnymen.
Okay. I mean, it's another label, a new romantic label.
Had nothing to do with New Romantics. At that time, I was...
I know I don't want to ask you if you got to do something with it, but did you think at the time also, oh my God, they're coming up with another label for that? Or
another label. When the New Romantic label came up, I did think, another label. And it was just people who were dressing up like clowns, as far as I'm concerned, and the extremity of the appearance that I saw of a lot of the new romantics. It was like pantomime. It was ridiculous. You couldn't do that in the daytime. I don't really agree with... I think visuals can actually alter things and they can make people think, but they have to be visible in the broad daylight, not just in a nightclub where people are off their heads and pissed. You know, then it makes no impact. It's just a bunch of clowns dressing up for each other. And by that time, I was no longer going to clubs, and I certainly wasn't interested in wearing a cake box on my head and drawing zigzags all over my face. I just thought the new romantic movement and people like Steve Strange were complete clowns.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think that I thought they went also during daytime in their... As
far as I'm aware, they didn't. I may be wrong, and I certainly know that the imagery that I saw of people like Steve Strange was so laboured, I can't imagine that he had time to get out of bed and be ready before 9 o'clock at night. It should be relatively easy to look a certain way. It shouldn't be laboured.
How long did it take you?
Today?
No, back at the time.
Minutes. It takes me probably from... I start the day every morning with a bath and a shave and stuff like that, and I'm ready in probably 30 to 45 minutes. That's all. My only problem is that whatever I've got to do, I don't want to do it. It's like I didn't want to do an interview here today. It's just because I don't really feel that I have anything relevant to say. I feel totally separate from everything that's going on. I've always felt that sense of isolation, and I stay in that sense of isolation. And asking me to comment on other people, or it's not that I'm coming out with negative comments, I can't say anything patronising about them. It's just I didn't like what I saw, and I only saw things briefly, and it didn't interest me.
Mm-hmm. So what was the idea behind your look?
There was no idea. It just absolutely evolved from school. There was absolutely no idea. There was no fashion. It was do it yourself, and the only way that I found a way that I didn't have to kind of make do and mend was through Vivienne Westwood's clothes shop in 1975, and it was like she designed the clothes for me. And to this day, Vivienne Westwood changed society. Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren, they brought us so many visuals that today we'd never see if they hadn't done them before. They made certain things mainstream. They were revolutionary, and she is still revolutionary. And I went into her shop and I bought a certain amount of clothes, which were then fetish clothes, and I didn't know what fetish was. I didn't know the connotations of rubber and plastic and stuff like that, but I wore it in the daytime because I didn't think it was, a kinky thing. It was just fantastic clothes. So my life changed really due to Vivienne Westwood, and my music was just a soundtrack to my being. Mm-hmm. I had to do something.
Mm-hmm. So when did the eye patch came in? At what time?
The eye patch came in probably 85. I'd had a surgical procedure on my nose that I didn't like, and I suddenly was in the charts, which I didn't expect to be. And I more or less woke up straight off the operating table with bruises and black eyes, and I had to do something to cover it. So I just made an eye patch. It certainly wasn't because as soon as the bruises were gone, the eye patch was gone, and people really liked the eye patch. They thought it was my image. And as I say, I'm not very good at fitting in boxes and stuff like that, so the eye patch bit the dust very quickly. Wherever I went, people would go, "Where's the eye patch?" As though I only had one eye. It was just simply to cover bruises.
Yeah, to me as a 15-year-old, or no, I was a little bit older, 16-year-old, I thought it's... your version of the Adamant pirate look, so you decided to wear an eye patch.
It's another one I thought was pathetic, Adamant. I thought it was pathetic.
All disguised for you.
Yeah, I don't think I'm any better. I don't think I'm... I don't. When I'm criticising other people, believe me, I criticise myself. To me, today, it's still a mystery why anyone's still interested. It's still a mystery why the records are so legendary and Spin Me is still being covered and re-recorded and stuff like that, because it's something I did a long time ago, and people ask me how I feel about it. I feel nothing. I've done it and it's over.
Yeah, I mean, people want to hang on to certain things in the past probably.
Yeah, they do, but expecting me to be enthusiastic about it, about Spin Me, I mean, I'm not ungrateful. It was a classic record, and it was the record I always wanted to make, but I've moved on, and I think I've done better things since. I'm always in a growth period, and to constantly take me back to nostalgia is like forcing me to wear my school uniform again. I mean, for enough money, I'm sure I could cram my body into my school uniform, but it wouldn't be very comfortable, and it's the same with spin me. I've grown out of it, and other people have picked it up, but I'm supposed to go, oh, isn't it fantastic? It's the best thing I ever did. Well, it isn't. It's just one of the things that I did. It's not my favourite. It's been very lucky for me financially, and it happens independently of me. But then I think every artist that's got the curse of becoming kind of a legendary cult figure or to be remembered, every artist has one song that they've done for which they'll always be remembered. I'm sure George Michael to his grave will have to sing Last Christmas, and I'm sure the last thing he feels like doing is singing Last Christmas. I'm sure Prince will always have to do Purple Rain, and I can more or less guarantee that those artists think, oh, not again.
Yeah.
Tina Turner and Nutbush City Limits, imagine how she feels. She's been performing it for about 175 years. And David Bowie with Space Odyssey. It's one thing you do that sticks in the public's consciousness. And, the public aren't very good at letting things grow. They like them in a box. They like you to be the spin me person or the Last Christmas person. It's a bit like getting your Christmas decorations out, and that red bauble is always the same. Well, I'm not a bauble. I change, and out of a grudging obligation, I will do spin me because I realise it's a contractual obligation. But if I never had to sing it again or hear it again, I think that I wouldn't miss it.
Probably. I know what you mean, but in the end, it's very often the case that artists want to, of course, to present their new work, and people always stick to the ones they know.
But what you realise is when you you fall, because nobody takes one, you fall into an artistic career. About 10 years into it, you realise it's exactly the same as working in Selfridges at a makeup counter. You're selling the same thing every day, just to different people. And I think when you're young and rebellious, or young and full of self-expression and hope, you think being an artist is going to enable you to change and be very contrary and contradictory. And it doesn't. Even Andy Warhol, he's most famous for that damn Marilyn picture that he did, but he did better work after. So being in the arts, very quickly after you've done your first creative thing, if it's successful, it stops being a creative thing. It's all about repetition. But then life itself is about repetition. We all wake up in the morning, even though some of us don't want to. We all take a pee, even though some of us don't feel like it. So everything is about repetition until you die and it's over.
Yeah, very ritualized also.
Very ritualized, and it keeps us in boxes. And, if I had my way, as soon as Spin Me was a hit, I'd have fired the band, got another band, and had a completely different sound. But it wasn't relevant, and the need and the want for money is prevalent in everybody.
Okay, let's stick to at the time when You Spin Me Round came out, and when you became successful with Dead or Alive. I mean, you had the band already 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
Before that. Was there still something in your, work ethic is a little bit too much probably, but was there still something left from your days from Nightmares in Wax, or from the earlier days, or was it completely something different, Dead or Alive, when you had the songs you had?
Dead or Alive was just a label for the bunch of musicians that I was working with. And I still didn't quite have the intelligence to realise the kind of job I was getting into. Like in the 80s, I hardly did any interviews because I thought there's nothing to talk about. Whereas interviews are part of the promotional campaign, but I was just not interested in promoting what I'd already done, because by the time Spin Me was released, it was recorded in early 1984, and by the time it was released, to me it was already old, and then by the time it was a hit, to me it was already very old, and I ended up going from country to country doing it when it was really old for me. I can remember the nightmare of being in Germany one day, Belgium the next, and other countries, constantly doing Spin Me, and it was already a hit, and I couldn't understand why, if it was already a hit, I had to go and do it. So I rebelled against that, and I suddenly pulled all the promo because I needed to make another album or make another record, but it was always Spin Me that they wanted, so the only way that I could cope with that. So I guess it was like the punk ethic, it was over for me, and I couldn't do any more to promote it. It was already a hit, thank you very much. Either let me do something else or leave me alone.
Mm-hmm. The critics, not only the critics, but the media in general, well, a lot of the press was more about your look, your outfit, than your music. Did that bother you?
I didn't read a single thing that was written about me, and to this day, I don't own a computer, and I don't look on the websites, and I don't look on what the gossip columnists are writing, so it couldn't bother me because I wasn't aware of it.
And when you went, you were also very successful in the United States with your spinning around, and later on also.
Yeah, I was.
As in England.
I was very successful in America, and to this day I can go back there and sell out a gig, although I haven't got a record deal at the moment, and I'm doing a new record called I Am the Arse with a project called Dirty Disco. That's the new ex-Dead or Alive project, Dirty Disco. And I'll go back to America and I'll do some shows and there'll probably be a record deal. If it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. I couldn't explain why I was successful in America. It happened out of the clubs, because guess what? I'd made a disco record that was exploding out of the clubs. So the record companies very reluctantly, they didn't do anything to help it because I wasn't there being active in the publicity machine. It happened on its own.
Did you went to the States when the success came?
Reluctantly, I went to the States because I hate to travel. I've always been very reluctant to travel and do tours. I went there and I didn't do interviews. I just did some concerts and stuff like that, and they were very well received. And next thing, the album was doing well, and then I'd had enough of it, and I went and made another album that spawned another major hit called Brand New Lover. And that went into the top 10, and it was a #1 dance single. And then I made the record that I've always wanted to make, which was called Come Home With Me Baby. And by that time, the record company thought they were involved and telling me what to do. And I certainly wasn't going to play their ball game of go on David Letterman and perform it live. I belonged in clubs, and I didn't belong in stadiums on tour support to Bon Jovi, which I was offered. They didn't know what to do with me, so I thought, if you don't know what to do with something, best to do nothing. And Come Home With Me Baby was #1 in the 12-inch Billboard dance chart, I think, for 17 weeks, and it held off Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson. But guess what the record company did? They didn't commercially release it. It would have gone straight to the Billboard charts at #5, and they didn't commercially release it because they were trying to teach me a lesson that if this was America, then it was very important. It was the biggest market in the world. If I didn't play ball, they were going to snatch the ball away from me and stuff like that. But I didn't care. I just went and did something else. I got big in Japan, and believe me, that was very easy. Success in Japan, because there's a language barrier. They don't expect you to have particular views on anything, which I didn't have. They don't ask too many questions. You go there, you do sell-out concerts, you get paid a fortune in money, and you come home and you get on with life. So Japan was really easy for me. So I said goodbye to America, and yet the record still kept happening. It was happening independently of me. Which I consider to be a marker that the records were of good quality. It didn't matter who I was or if I was a gender bender or a pig.
I was wondering about the success in the States, because it's a very, conservative market, America. And I was wondering, all these colorful people, all these exotic creatures from England are coming to the States, and they fell in love with you all. I don't have any explanation.
I think in America they just fell in love fundamentally with the music. America is very the audiences or the general public are very musically orientated, and if it gets on the radio, I think the American public are much more broad-minded than they're given credit for. America's a conservative place in the industry, but the general public aren't. They're out there rebelling on the streets and looking for some self-expression on a bigger scale than anybody in England ever was. And you must remember, the population of America is so huge. There's so many different kinds of people there, and if you appeal to just a small portion of them, you've got a hit record on your hands. Because it happened independently of me, and I wasn't sitting on David Letterman and doing interviews for Rolling Stone magazine and photo shoots and stuff like that, I've got no idea why it happened. All I can say is it was because they liked the record. And when I actually went over there and did some very limited appearances, which I did very few shows, they were very well received. And then for me, it was over and I moved on. I'm very black and white in things. When I've done something, it's over. And the thing is that for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to talk about it. But in an ideal world, people would ask me something new, and even then I might not want to talk about it. I just like to do what I do, get on with it, and then just leave it behind. But it isn't that way in the music industry, and it's probably not that way in the film industry or the theatre industry or the fashion industry. Everything is a repeat of something you've done before, and if it's successful, I think if you were out in America doing 100 dates and your record wasn't successful, then you'd have some self-questioning to do. Because you'd done everything the record company told you was absolutely necessary to do in order to get a hit record. But I did none of it. It just happened. It was like roulette for me. It just happened.
Okay. Did you experience any hostility in America too? Because
no, I experienced no hostility whatsoever in America. I didn't go out there and cause a riot. I just went and did what I did. And if I did experience any hostility, it was possibly in the media. But as I've said earlier, really, I don't read anything that's written about me because I'm not interested, and I don't sit on the internet reading what people have said about me. I'm not interested. I've very rarely read a review of one of my records. I read one review of Spin Me that was really damning, and that was by Neil Tennant of the Pet Shop Boys. He said it was rubbish. But I think really that's the last review that I read, and to this day things are written about me and I'm absolutely not aware of them, and I think that's the healthiest way to be. I can't imagine being one of those artists that has a press clipping file and all their own DVDs and all their own records at home and boring everyone to death playing it to them. I don't own one of my records, and I don't own a DVD of anything that I've done, and it's just something that I've done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to ask you one thing about America. Can't remember it, so let's move on. You Spin Me Round reminded me a lot of the Hi-NRG music of the time. Did you have that in mind, or did you like the Hi-NRG?
All I had Hi-NRG, another label. To me, it was just disco. Hi-NRG was another label, and I certainly didn't think about Hi-NRG. There were disco records out in the early 70s by artists like Silvester that I liked, and I wanted to make a record like one of them. And the artist Divine, who'd worked, before he had a hit, he worked with a producer called Bobby O in America and did things like Native Love, and I wanted to make a record that was like that, and I got to make a record like that. But Hi-NRG is a label. If it was just purely Hi-NRG Spin Me, it would have been just stuck in clubs and not been a hit, because Silvester didn't have many hits. He had Mighty Real, and everyone knows him for it, but he did far better things than Mighty Real and had a huge catalogue that's largely forgotten. I just wanted to make a record like he'd made, not necessarily Mighty Real, the other stuff that came after, and Divine's early stuff as well. And when Divine had a commercial hit with You Think You're a Man But You're Only a Boy, I suddenly realised that there was definitely a chance of me having a hit, no matter what I was or what I said or what I thought. If the record was good enough, it would be a hit. So I got to make Spin Me. It was a record I always wanted to make, and it was a huge hit, but there's no label on it. It was a pop hit, not a Hi-NRG hit. It was #1 in 17 countries, and it went gold, silver, and every other colour that you could get. So it was in the pop chart, so that means it wasn't necessarily a Hi-NRG record. It broke all boundaries.
Okay. So you worked with Stock Aitken Waterman on...
Yes, I did, before they'd done anything, yes.
Prior you worked with Zoe's Beheld
yes.
on your first LP, and then You Spin Me with this SAW. So what was working like with them?
At that time it was very good, because they were hungry and they'd had no hits, and they were very poor, and it was a gamble. And when we took them the demo, saw the demo of Spin Me Round, it sounded identical to their production. They didn't want to change anything. They just actually had it in a better studio and made it better quality, and they completely believed it would be a hit, but our record company didn't believe it would be a hit. They said it would be a cult record and get no bigger, and they didn't do anything. The record company did nothing to promote it. They'd put it out on 12-inch, and it just kept selling and selling, and it broke all records. And next thing you know, on a 12-inch basis, it entered the mainstream charts, but you weren't allowed to sell that many 12 inches and be taken seriously, and it was held back in the charts. Like 1 week it was supposed to be 18, but the chart system held it down to 42, because they couldn't believe anyone was selling that many 12-inch records. And then the record company reluctantly put out a 7-inch and a picture disc, and it just absolutely exploded. I was on Top of the Pops once, it went straight to #6. I was on Top of the Pops twice, it went to #1, and it would have stayed there a lot longer had the record company have actually believed in it. So it completely broke all boundaries. Working with Stock Aitken Waterman in those days was really good. It got to be a very unpleasant experience because when you've worked with a producer, the only producer that I've worked with that I enjoyed the actual relationship with was Zoyce B. Held, because he was very creative and experimental. Once they had a hit, which was with us, they wanted to repeat that formula with anybody and everybody, which they did. They went on to do it with Bananarama, but we were the only artists that worked with Saw that wrote all of our own material. And they looked at our hit and all of our discs and all of our finances and thought, well, hold on, we could write the hits and just get anybody to do them. So us going back to Stock Aitken Waterman was kind of an interruption to their financial flow, because they knew if we had a hit, they wouldn't be making as much money as they would with a Bananarama record, because they wrote it. So we were very much not very popular with them because we wouldn't let them write our stuff.
So it wasn't really like production company. They were not more than artistic. They didn't work.
Stock Aitken Waterman were extremely.
Too much of an overlap there.
Okay.
Stock Aitken Waterman were an extremely talented producers. Pete Waterman was the ideas man. He was rarely in the studio. It was Mike Stock and Matt Aitken that were the producers. They had magical ears. And they also went on to become absolutely brilliant commercial songwriters. But they were creative in themselves because they did such a huge body of work with other people, all very different styles, from Rick Astley to Princess. I'm not even sure who else they worked with because I didn't follow it. They became what I called a sausage factory, just producing hits, but some of them were very good quality. Yeah, they had creativity, but they weren't willing to allow creativity in any of their artists. If you were one of their in their stable, you had no say in what you did. You wrote the song, you sung it as they said, and it was pretty well guaranteed to be a hit, as you can see by their track record. But where are all their artists now? They're all over, because once Stock Aitken Waterman moved on, the artist was forgotten, and I'm still here, so I guess I won out in the end. They didn't allow creativity in an artist at all. They did when we started with them.
I mean, you provide them with their first #1 hit, huh?
Absolutely, and it was worldwide. I've got to say that more than them to thank, they've got me to thank, because they were absolutely nobody, and I was very happy for what they went on to become. But I was then ready to work with another producer or self-produce a record, and guess what? The record company didn't want it. They wanted us to stay with a successful formula.
Did you embrace the video clip culture at the time? Did you think it was a good vehicle to sell pop music?
To me, videos were just a postcard to send to a country that you couldn't be in. If you're in Belgium one day and you couldn't be in Germany the next, let them play the video. It was a necessary evil, and it was easier than going out doing world tours. So did I embrace it? Not particularly. I just did what I had to do, which was a video.
Yeah, but, and you
Excuse me.
You could avoid traveling.
I hate to travel. To this day, to even traveling here today, to me, was a nightmare. I really don't like to travel. I would gladly stay at home and vegetate for the rest of my life.
Oh my God.
Well, I've been everywhere. I've seen it. I don't need to see it all again.
Let me see what I got. Okay, so let's come to the questions of my colleagues. As I said before, you've answered already one. What do you thought about the work of Divine and Bobby Orlando? How did you look at the acid house scene at the late 80s? Did you know?
By the time the acid house scene had surfaced, I just had become a recluse. I wasn't interested. I certainly didn't go to nightclubs and partake in the acid house scene. It's difficult to have a viewpoint on it. From what I'm aware, the acid house scene killed off major producers because people were doing it in their bedrooms. So it was a bit like punk, but with technology. There's nothing that I particularly remember from the acid house records that I think is a historic record that I'd have wanted to emulate. Obviously, influences seep into mainstream producers. Some things Madonna is doing now have been influenced by acid house, but it was not something I was interested in at all. By that time, I'd done it all, seen it all, been everywhere, sold millions of records. And that there is a time when it no longer stimulates you, you know. So I wasn't actually out there in the acid house scene looking for new ideas. As far as I was concerned, it was a bunch of kids taking silly drugs and dancing like idiots to hypnotic music. It didn't have the glitter about it that disco had. None of the records were as positive as a Donna Summer or a Silvester record or a Bobby O record. They were just a mindless drone from what I heard. And I think you needed to be on drugs to actually enjoy them. In the 80s.
In the 80s, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind, you've missed nothing.
Okay. Nena was big with 99 Luftballons.
Nena, oh yes, yeah. That was also a hit here, no? Yeah.
Fucking
also,
hell, it was shit.
Trio, also. Did any of those German bands like Kraftwerk have an impact on you?
Not on me. I know bands like Kraftwerk were hugely influential on things like the Human League, but
yours were Moroder. Yeah.
Mine was Moroder and Silvester. Patrick Cowley, more Patrick Cowley than Bobby O were my influences, and I've never made a record that comes anywhere near the quality of a Silvester record. He has a huge catalogue that everyone should check out, and that's my influences, and I've stolen things blatantly from him. And he's dead now, but he did such a body of great work. He was working like on an indie scene and recording in somebody's house because there was no money to finance him after Mighty Real because he blew it all, but he still continued to make these amazing disco records that were euphoric. You didn't need drugs to get high listening to those. And to this day, I play them to younger people and they go, oh my God, this is fantastic. I want to go out and dance. And if something can have that much of a positive effect on you just musically, then it's a good thing. Unlike Acid House, which you had to take several pills and sweat like a pig and then wobble around badly in a dance club to get off on it. It was just like brainwashing. I think everything in modern culture has become complete brainwashing. I think computers are brainwashing. I think TVs are brainwashing because you're so riveted to celebrity news and celebrity gossip and celebrity magazines that you don't go out and live a life. And I think the general public are being controlled by media brainwashing. And I'm certainly not controlled by media brainwashing. One, I'm not interested, and two, I refuse to be controlled by it. I like to do my own thing. And I can genuinely say that I'm not interested. I'm aware of bands like Girls Aloud. They had a hit that I liked last year, but do I think they're good? No, because they didn't write it. When I go to restaurants, I don't thank the waiter for a great meal. I thank the chef. So groups like Girls Aloud, and I can't think of anybody else at the moment, they've got nothing to be applauded for. It's just that they deliver the meal to the table, just like a waiter. So there's nobody out there who is actually doing anything. Now it has really become that people aren't writing their own material. It's a team of producers and a songwriter, and the artist's just a little puppet in the way. And it's great work if you can get it. They probably have a really happy life, but it wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, disposable pop, that's something you always had from the 50s on.
Yeah, but in the 80s, people were writing their own material. Look at bands like Eurythmics. Wasn't a fan, never will be. But she was writing her own material with Dave Stewart, and some of it was groundbreaking material. They were influenced by Kraftwerk. You can hear the same synthesizer sounds. Kraftwerk were a big influence, but not on me. My influences were elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. What would you say was so special about dance music in the 80s? What was the essence for you?
Well, from the 70s, dance music became my thing because it made me happy. I was too young to go to clubs, but the music itself made me happy, and I think that's the job of music. That's why I can't stand bands like Nirvana, because it's a soundtrack to misery and depression. Music is meant to make people happy and meant to make them feel good, and well, for me it is. So anything that makes me feel even slightly moody, I just won't even entertain. And now how I hear music is I have very noisy neighbours that play stuff, and I can hear it in the bedroom in the morning, and I wish they'd stop playing Girls Aloud. But they play things about 8 in the morning, so I get to hear music, and then gradually someone tells me what it is. I don't own a radio, and I don't watch MTV or anything, so my music comes through the floor above.
Okay. But you said yours is the music of the 70s, dance music of the 70s more, but if you think about the ones of the 80s, what would define the dance music of the 80s then?
Well, by the 80s, I'd stopped going to clubs. I was too busy being successful, so I can't say a record that defined the 80s because it would have come out of clubland, and I was no longer going to clubs. So, for me, when good music in the 80s, music I liked, started to be made in the 80s, it was definitely the Pet Shop Boys. I thought they were groundbreaking and revolutionary, and the influences were all from the 70s, because he was kind of older, like I am, and I knew where his influences were coming from. And I think the Pet Shop Boys did good tributes to things that they took ideas from. And to this day, the Pet Shop Boys continue to make absolutely excellent records that I really like. I don't own them, but when I hear them, I don't want to put plugs in my ears and stuff. And I think he's got a great voice, very interesting voice. I think Neil Tennant conveys songs in a very dignified manner. I think they have great presentation. I saw them on the TV recently, and I thought it was a great presentation on the Brit Awards. I thought they stood out a mile, and nothing that came on the same show as them, including things like Girls Aloud, could hold a candle to them. So great music, dance, pop. The Pet Shop Boys were the defining thing for me.
Mm-hmm. And have you been aware of rap music or hip hop
No.
in the early 80s?
No.
Also when you went to the States?
No, not at all. You see, you got to realize that I am just into my own thing, and if I find out about things, it's by accident. I don't research, so I wasn't aware of rap music in the 80s, and I wasn't even aware of heavy metal music in the 80s. As I've said earlier, there's only two types of music. There's good music and bad music, and there's probably a million records out there, and always have been, that are fantastic, but I'll never get to hear them because I'm not interested in delving. If it lands under my nose, I'll give it I'll give it a few seconds, and in a few seconds, if I like it, then it's good. But I don't.
Have been that way, You're sitting in a taxi and by accident you listen to a rap song for the first time and think, oh my god.
Well, one thing about me is I can't bear to listen to music at home, and if I'm in a car and the radio comes on, I actually want it turned off. Although sometimes it's impolite. I like silence, not music. I like the noise of the TV in the background, people talking, but not particularly music, because I find it either stimulates or depresses. When I'm at home or traveling, I don't want to be stimulated, and I certainly don't want to be depressed. So I don't even own an iPod. If I go and work out at the gym, I don't do it to music. I do it in relative silence. Actually, I do hear music at the gym sometimes because it's on the TV screen, but I manage to zone it out. And everyone says, oh, you got to get an iPod. I don't want an iPod. I've been given iPods and I've given them away. So music, I'm just not that passionate about it. It's just something that I do. I'm not very good at selling what I do, because once I've done it, it's over, and it's up to the public to decide. I don't agree with brainwashing, and I don't agree with the promotional circuit that's necessary. When you make a record, the record should be enough, because at the end of the day, the record is all that's for sale. It's not about making yourself a popular character or an interesting character or how good your video is. Video is a separate entity to the music. The music is the music, and that should be all that people want, but they don't, because the media, they want more. They want a character they like. They want a role model. They want someone with views that they can share. They want to know about your lifestyle. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why they would. I think there's more things to be interested in, like day-to-day life and getting on with life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in a way, you fuel the whole thing also with your persona.
But there is no persona. It's just me. It's not a persona. It's just me. And I can't understand. I did a very lengthy interview last night, and it went on from 4 p.m, from 10 o'clock. And I just remember thinking, what on earth does she find interesting here? Because I'm telling her I'm not interested in anything. She was just fascinated by it. So that's just my personality that people are interested in. She said, you're a role model. I can't imagine why I'm a role model.
Yeah, maybe because you are like...
Because I'm not interested.
No, because you are very focused on yourself, probably. That could be a role model too, someone who's really...
It's not for me to understand or comment on. It's something that happens independently in me. It's like my success. I did nothing for it. I just made the record, which is all I should have done. Made the record. The success happened independently. If I go and do a show, that's all I'm doing. I'm not going to do interviews to promote the show. I've never travelled and done a tour and gone to all the radio stations and said, hey, come and see me in Chicago tonight. It's going to be rocking. because one show is the same as another, and I only do it for a very limited time because I can't get the enthusiasm to do any more than 6 dates. So I'll never do a world tour. I do a couple of shows, and as far as I'm concerned, if I'm doing shows and people want to see me, they should see me while they can, because they can't expect me to be out there with a cattle prod giving me the energy to do it, because then I'm bored and I want to go home.
Okay, before you get bored here, and I know you want to go home already, let me ask...
I'm fine.
Let me ask you about a few things about, like the more industrial and gothic part. In the late
You'll have
70s,
to tell me what it is.
Yes, bands like Throbbing Gristle in the late 70s.
Never heard a damn thing Cabaret Voltaire or Throbbing Gristle have done. Somebody very recently mentioned Throbbing Gristle, that they're still going. The name of Throbbing Gristle stood out to me, and I think the singer was called Genesis P. Orridge. His name stood out, but I know absolutely nothing about Throbbing Gristle, and I've never heard any of their records, if they made any, and I've never heard a record by Cabaret Voltaire. That was really when I zoned it all out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and later on in the late 80s, I read that some of your songs with Dead or Alive were associated with in a gothic way.
Oh, what a shame. Probably because I wore black clothes.
Yeah, maybe. But did you have any relation to goth?
Absolutely not.
No.
The most gothic thing I knew was I was friends with the Cramps, and they certainly weren't gothic. They were more 50s rockabilly, and they fitted into what people thought was a gothic label. And I knew the Cramps personally, and they were like horrified that they'd fit into this category of idiots dressing up like Count Dracula and his wife in the daytime with black lips and black circles around their eyes and crucifixes hanging off them. It was just more clowns. It was like New Romantic, and I know that imagery is still big, and whenever I see someone on the street, I think they're either very unhappy or they're pathetic.
It's interesting because
it's negative.
It lasted all the years. There are still huge festivals with all these.
But then,
especially in Germany also.
Oops. Things do last. I mean, there's still Teddy Boys, isn't there? There's still rockers. There's still mods. There's people out there that hang on to a nostalgic movement, basically because they're afraid of the future. And I think that, all I know about Gothic is the imagery of people with blue streaks in their hair and waist-length black hair and big platform boots. And I just think they look funny, unless they're, under 17. I think it's really sad. Who wants to go around looking like Dracula?
Yeah, maybe someone who's against all the body cult on the other end, because we were talking about the other day that at the same time in the early 80s all this aerobic stuff came up with Fonda and the whole body cult.
But if anyone is opposed to things like what you call the body cult, which I don't see it, I see it as self-preservation and a positive thing because it's people staying healthy. If anybody is trying to rebel against that, they're a very negative person, and one day they'll wise up and shit themselves and suddenly be down at the gym trying to lose 70 flabby pounds, and they'll get rid of the black hair dye and stuff like that. Movements end. They're only relevant for a few minutes. It is very Andy Warhol. It lasts 15 minutes. That's what punk did. That's what goth did. But there are still people who weren't there the first time round, who are afraid of the future and largely afraid of the present. So they stay stuck in something that they can read about or study and dress up. And I just remember bands like The Mission or the Sisters of Mercy. I remember seeing them on TV once and just thinking how absolutely tragic and negative and depressing it was.
But weren't members of Dead or Alive also part of the
One was, and he was a guitarist in my band, Wayne Hussey. He was a guitarist in my band for about 3 months, and then we fired him because there was no role for him because we were using synthesizers. We didn't need a guitarist. And about 3 years later, he emerged in The Mission, and he was a Mormon, for God's sake. And next thing, he's got waist-length black hair, and he's covering himself in white makeup. And it's just goth is the, to me, it's just an area for pathetic, negative people to go who are depressed and fed up, or they think they're depressed and fed up, and they're overweight, and they just want to hide behind all that imagery. Excuse me.
Okay. You Spin Me is now again in the charts.
I believe so.
To be honest, I forgot the artist's name.
Flow Rider.
Flow Rider, yeah, that's it. So, what do you think? What is it that the young crowd is so fond of the 80s?
It's I don't know if they're so fond of the 80s, because every time we're in a period, we tend to think that something that's come before is going to be better, that it's better. We look back with fondness at things that we missed or things that we didn't acknowledge at the time. Very few people look forward. People who missed the 80s, obviously they buy those compilation albums that have other people's hits on, and it all was very positive in the 80s. It really was, but it ended and it's over. You can't recreate it or hang on to it. You got to make way for new things, and just because new things aren't particularly great, there might be something great at any minute. So let the past go. I don't hang on to the 80s. It was a great period. I didn't appreciate it at the time because I was young and foolish. But it ended, and I accept that it's over. But I think that people are fond of my record because it was a great record and it was a very well-structured song. And I don't care if a rapper or a serial killer records it, because it's a good record and you can't really make it bad. And what does it do for me? It brings me money. Am I flattered? I guess so. Do I care? Not really.
Well, I mean, the young folks, they haven't been around the first time when it was a hit, so they can't hang on to something. They experience it for the first time now, the music from the 80s. So I was wondering what's so interesting for them if they listen to stuff from the 80s or cover it now with young bands or using same synths from the time.
I couldn't actually answer that because it's not something I'm guilty of. I don't really understand it. I mean, some people still hang on to Bill Haley and the Comets rocking around the clock, and it's long gone and over. And as far as I'm concerned, my record's long gone and over, and people revive it. It's like, there is a fascination with the past. People still read books about Marilyn Monroe. Who cares? It was 1962. Well, they want to look back to the past because, as I say, they're afraid of the present, and they're certainly not going to welcome the future. Everything is. I don't look to the future. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I could walk out of here and walk under a bus. I'm supposed to be doing a show in a few weeks. Will I make it? I don't know. I could be dead. I concentrate very much on the present, and that doesn't seem to be that common a thing for people to do. They look back on the past. They're not looking to the future or creating anything new. In an ideal world, a record would be out for 3 months, it would be a hit and it would be forgotten, but it just isn't that way. I don't own a copy of Spin Me, and I don't own a copy of any of my albums. People go, really, you don't own them? What would I want to own them for? I don't keep my shit when it falls in the toilet. I've done it. I don't keep scrapbooks of all the press that I've done because it's largely all rubbish. If I'm on TV, I don't rush round to someone's house and say I'm on TV at 8 o'clock tonight. Let's all stare at it. So I just think I do think I am different in that way. So I can't answer why they look back. I don't understand it, but they do, and I can't change it. So allow them to do it. If that's what makes them happy, I think that they should be allowed to do it. Personally, I don't understand it. I think it's a waste of the present to look back to the past.
Okay. Well, what was the reason you wrote your memories?
Money.
Okay.
And they weren't memories. When I wrote an autobiography called Freak Unique, I had literally 2 nights. I didn't write it. I spoke into a tape recorder for 2 nights. And I made a lot of it up because there was nothing to say. And to write an autobiography, it should take you months to do, and you should be on a journey of self-discovery. But the publishing company lied to me, and they said they'd already had somebody write an autobiography of me. And it was going to come out and I wouldn't like it. And I said, well, I'm completely confident it'll all be rubbish because no one knows a damn thing about me. And they gave me a copy. Well, I didn't look inside the copy of the book. I was just given a book in a jacket, which is very funny of them. And they said, we can stop this one coming out if you do one. And we'll give you like £10,000 to do it, but you've only got 2 days. So I thought, well, hold on, they're going to give me 10 grand to do it. And I've only got 2 days, and it's going to stop that one coming out. So I just spoken to a tape recorder with a very unqualified journalist. I never approved it, and I've never read it. And as far as I know, it was utter and complete rubbish, and the print was that big, and it certainly didn't encapsulate my life. I never thought anyone would be interested in my life. So I wasn't arrogant enough to go, hey, get me a deal for an autobiography. It literally arrived in my hotel room, and anyone, yourself included, for that kind of money for 2 days' work would have done it.
Be sure.
Absolutely sure, but it's certainly not about my life. It's a mixture of fact and fiction. I call it faction. And I've spoken to a tape recorder, and when I did glance through a copy that somebody owned, it was absolutely abstract. It was badly done, and even the photos in it were crap. And it was just rubbish. It had a great sleeve, and it didn't do very well, thank God. And it was forgotten. That's what it should be, forgotten. I certainly didn't want to write a prize-winning autobiography, because my life's not over yet. Write an autobiography when you're living in a cottage somewhere in a remote place and your life is over. There's more to come. So what am I going to do? Like Jordan, keep adding a new chapter? No, one day when I think it's relevant, I'll talk to somebody and they can write it.